Good morning, friends, and welcome to another episode. In today's episode, we'll be looking at the atomicity of compounds. So, simply put, atomicity of compound is just about how many atoms can you find in a compound. So, let's quickly start by using an example. So, let's say you have the compound H2SO4. This compound has some atoms that come together to form it. So you have hydrogen atoms in there. You can also see sulfur atoms in there. You can see oxygen atoms in there. But how many of the hydrogen atoms can you find? So you can find two of the hydrogen atoms. How many of the sulfur atoms can you find there? You can find just one sulfur atom. And how many of the oxygen atoms can you find there? You can find four oxygen atoms. So when you add all of these numbers together, 2 plus 1 plus 4 would give us 7. So the atomicity of H2SO4 is 7. Now, I need us to differentiate between this and the number of elements in H2SO4. If you are asked how many atoms are in this compound H2SO4, the answer is 7. However, if you are asked how many elements are in this compound H2SO4, the answer is 3. Remember, when you look at the compound carefully, it's just 3 elements. You can see hydrogen elements, sulfur element, and oxygen elements. Those are the elements. The atoms, however, are the individual atoms of the elements. So in the case of hydrogen element, you have 2 of the hydrogen atoms in the compound. Sulfur, you have just one sulfur atom, and in oxygen, you have 4 of the oxygen atoms. So I need us to note the difference between these two. Let's look at another example. So we'll use CO2, use carbon dioxide. You are asked how many elements are in CO2? It's just 2 elements, that is carbon and oxygen. So you can find carbon element in CO2 and you can find oxygen element in CO2. However, if you asked how many atoms are in CO2, you can find 3 atoms. The carbon atoms, you have 1, oxygen atoms, you have 2. So making a total of 3 atoms. So I need you to note the difference between these two questions, whether you are asked how many atoms are in a compound or how many elements are in a compound. They are not the same. Now let's look at another thing. So I'm going to write H2SO4 again. Now I'm going to also put a coefficient in front of the H2SO4. Maybe put 2 here. This 2 that is in front of H2SO4. Remember and observe how I'm written the 2. It's not a superscript, neither is it a subscript. It's just a coefficient written in front of the H2SO4. Anytime you have something like this 2 represents the number of molecules of H2SO4. So in this case, you have 2 molecules of H2SO4. I need you to remember this. So 2 molecules of H2SO4 will be written as 2 as a coefficient then we have H2SO4. Now I will need us to determine the atomicity of these two molecules of H2SO4. So how do we determine the atomicity of two molecules of H2SO4? Let's quickly do that. So first, we need to know how many elements are in H2SO4. You can have hydrogen element in there, you can have sulfur element in there, and you can have oxygen element. So there are three elements in H2SO4, two molecules of H2SO4. However, let's look at the atoms. Now, how many hydrogen atoms are in there? So the coefficient 2 simply implies that if you have two atoms, or that 2 multiplies throughout all of the elements. So in the case of hydrogen, it means that these 2 would have to multiply these 2. So 2 times 2, that means that we have 4 of the hydrogen atoms in there. So I need us to note that. Okay, so what about sulfur? Remember, in the case of sulfur, sulfur will be 2, because this 2 would multiply the sulfur. The sulfur has 1 here. Although this one is not seen, it is there. So just note that sulfur, we have only sulfur, 1 atom of sulfur without the coefficient 2. But with the coefficient 2, it will mean that sulfur has 2 atoms. How many atoms of oxygen do we have? There's coefficient of 2, and there's a subscript of 2 by the oxygen. So 2 times 4 will mean we have 8 oxygen atoms. So in all, we are going to have 4 plus 2 plus 8. That will give us 14 atoms within the 2 molecules of sulfuric acid, or H2SO4. Let's look at another example. So here we're going to take 2 molecules of NaOH, sodium hydroxide. How would you write this? 2 molecules of sodium hydroxide will be written as this 2NaOH. So the first question is, how many elements do we have in this compound? We have just 3 elements. So we have sodium element, we have oxygen element, and we have hydrogen element. Then how many atoms do we have in this compound? Remember, the 2 coefficient is multiplying the sodium 1. So that means that we have 2 sodiums. Oxygen is 1 in the sodium hydroxide. So times the 2 coefficients, or coefficient of 2, will give us 2 oxygen. Hydrogen in sodium hydroxide is 1. So we need to multiply that one by the coefficient of 2. That will give us 2. So in all, sodium hydroxide, or 2 molecules of sodium hydroxide, will contain 6 atoms, 2 coming from sodium, 2 coming from oxygen, and 2 coming from hydroxide. Let's look at another example. So we look at 4 molecules of sodium chloride. So that will give us 4Na. How many elements do we have here? We have just 2 elements, sodium and chlorine. The next question is, how many atoms of sodium do we have here? We have 4 atoms of sodium, because in just sodium chloride, we have just 1 atom in there. But the coefficient of 4 would multiply the 1. That will give us this 4. Then what about chlorine? In sodium chloride, we have just 1 molecule of chlorine, but because of the coefficient of 4, it will mean that we would have 4 atoms of chlorine. So in all, the total number of the atoms in 4 molecules of sodium chloride will be 8 atoms. So I believe you understand what atomicity is. And if you are asked to determine, for example, you are given a compound and you are asked to tell how many elements are in those compounds, you should be able to tell. And if you are also asked how many atoms are in those compounds, you should also be able to tell that. Again, if you are given a certain molecule of a compound, let's say 2 molecules or 4 molecules of a compound, and you are asked how many atoms are in that compound, you should be able to tell. It's as simple as that. Let's look at the final example. And this, I'm going to draw a chemical reaction. So we have 4 molecules of aluminium added to 3 molecules of oxygen. That is giving us 2 molecules of aluminium hydroxide. Sorry, aluminium oxide. So here, this is a very simple question you could be asked. You could be asked, okay, there is a reaction between 4 molecules of aluminium and 3 molecules of oxygen. That resulted in 2 molecules of aluminium oxide. So determine maybe the atomicity of the product, the aluminium oxide. All you do is just so that's this one. So here, you just multiply this 2 by this 2. That will give us what? 4 aluminium atoms. Then you multiply again this 2 by the 3 here. That will give us what? 6 aluminium atoms. So in total, you're going to get the atomicity of 10 atoms in 2 molecules of aluminium oxide. So it's as simple as that. And that will bring us to the end of today's lesson. Please share the video if you have not done so, and subscribe to the channel if you also not done that. You need to encourage me. Like I've always been saying, subscribing make it easier for you to get updates when new videos are being made. Take care of yourselves, enjoy your day, and we are going to meet again in the next episode. Bye.